Hello everyone, my name is Michaela Hendrick and I'm a graduate research assistant at Old Dominion University. Thank you all for joining in on this presentation virtually. It's great to have the opportunity to share this research with you. I have some preliminary and emerging results to share from our ongoing research modeling perceptions of the variability of ecosystem services in the Dolores River Watershed. To provide you with some geographical context, the Dolores River is a tributary of the Colorado River. It runs 241 miles through the rugged and arid region of the Colorado Plateau in Colorado and Utah. It's fed out of the western San Juan Mountains and snakes down through the canyon. Eventually, the Dolores and West Dolores feed into the McPhee Reservoir and Dam, which was completed in 1984. The dam and diversion canals are operated by the Bureau of Reclamation, and roughly 85% of the water that enters the reservoir is diverted for agriculture, leaving a minimum legally mandated flow below the dam. This low flow struggles to support native fish species as well as recreators. The McPhee Dam also operates on a fill-then-spill management paradigm, which means that the dam is filled first and only in high water years when capacity in the reservoir is exceeded are larger flows released downstream. This leaves a fragmented and incredibly altered flow pattern beyond the dam. This management policy really frustrates local recreators, as releases are often done unannounced or with very short notice, leaving locals a slim window for recreational opportunity. In Cisco, Utah, above the confluence with the Colorado River, average flow fell from 1,160 CFS annually to just 599 after the dam completion. In Bedrock, Colorado, above the San Miguel confluence, flows reduced from an annual average of 504 CFS to 240 after the dam completion. According to American Whitewater, an organization that represents whitewater conservation enthusiasts, a boatable flow on the Dolores for a 14 and 18-foot raft is 800 and 1,000 CFS respectively. For fish spawning, it's important water stays at an appropriate flow rate, level, and temperature to avoid early and unsuccessful spawning of native fish. Sustained flow volumes of 200 CFS minimum are needed to keep temperatures low enough to delay spawning. Flushing flows and habitat maintenance flows have been estimated by Trout Unlimited and the Water Conservancy District at ranges of 400 to 800 CFS and 2,000 to 3,400 CFS respectively. These flows are necessary to naturally regulate the system. The Dolores has a long history of water allocation conflict and conservation efforts. So to review some of this, I'd like to reference the beginning of this timeline. In 1968, the McPhee Dam was approved for construction. In 1976, just 11 years later, a congressionally ordered study of the Dolores River was conducted, and the river was recommended for protection under the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act. While this recommendation was important for the recognition of the intrinsic value of the river, some of their claims for future recreational opportunity have since been disproven, including the assurance that the McPhee Dam would solve the unpredictability of snowpack and flow rate for rafters. They counted on the reliability of snowpack data to inform releases from the dam in the future when it was completed, saying boating days could be predicted, scheduled, and grouped, and that rafters would be able to harness more boating opportunities because they would know well in advance when opportunities would occur. Hearing from stakeholders shows that this has been a failure on the part of managers to uphold. Data from American Whitewater shows that on average, no boatable days exist in dry years, and only 34 exist in wet years, which come on average every 5 to 6 years. Since 2000, the river has run at 1,200 CFS or more for only 131 days as of July 2019. In 1979, a National Park Service and BLM study team completed an environmental impact statement for the Colorado and Lower Dolores River. All sections were eligible for designation under the WSRA and contained outstanding remarkable values in scenic, ecological, geological, and recreational characteristics. The designation was never assigned, but a year later, BLM designated the Dolores River Canyon Study Area. In 1984, the dam was completed. The rest of this timeline shows the growth and collaborative mobilization of people and organizations to try to rectify some of the impacts affecting the Dolores. And some of these include fish kills, an additional proposed dam, drought, water allocation, and the need for legislative protection. In 2015, The legislative subcommittee of the San Juan Citizens Alliance released a proposal for a National Conservation Area designation in place of a WSRA designation. There's many factors that contribute to the pressures the Dolores River faces as a watershed. First is climate change. The Dolores is subject to overall warmer weather and longer, more intense droughts. Second is shorter winters. The Dolores relies heavily on snowpack to reach desired flows as well as reserved water in the McPhee Reservoir. With shorter, more erratic winters and diminishing snowpacks, this is a real threat. Annual variability is a pressure that challenges managers. One year's relative abundance of available water rarely predicts the following years, and this really complicates transboundary planning and allocation. Water allocation is a contested and political topic. While recreators struggle to obtain acceptable flow rates, antiquated laws in water allocation force farmers from time to time to flood their fields with the water they don't necessarily need, but would otherwise lose rights to. This can be defined as a use it or lose it policy, and this will continue to challenge managers as water becomes generally less abundant. The last pressure to the system is conflict of interest, which I've touched on a bit. You have the needs of agriculture and farmers, boaters and anglers, all fighting for a stressed water source. The one thing all these pressures have in common, however, is that they are a threat to or dependent upon the ecosystem services that the river provides. With so many stakeholders relying upon the ecosystem services of the river, our research group set out to characterize perspectives of stakeholders on the variability of these services and the effect on access to recreation. Variability caused by climate change can alter stakeholder perspectives on the future of the Dolores River watershed. Phase 1 of this research was an exploratory phase consisting of stakeholder interviews using a modified Seidman approach. The first round of semi-structured interviews was conducted at the end of 2018, with 25 interviews of key stakeholders in Colorado and Utah. We used a snowball sampling approach to take advantage of the robust, existing network of relationships in the watershed. Questions elicited stakeholders' experiences, perceptions, and outlook on the future of the Dolores, as well as the variability of ecosystem services. The second phase of sampling is ongoing, consisting of stakeholder interviews as well as an itemization of ecosystem services. For this, we're utilizing this comprehensive list of provisioning, regulating, supporting, and cultural ecosystem services from a 2012 study by Brown, Montag, and Lyon identifying ecosystem services. The interview questions included those which asked stakeholders to identify which ecosystem services are or were once provided by the Dolores. In Phase 1, we spoke with anglers and recreationists who rely on boatable flows or sufficient flows for trout viability. We also spoke to guide services who are impacted by fluctuating flows as well as short-notice releases from McPhee Dam. Our largest group of stakeholders we spoke with were governmental agencies and resource specialists like the Bureau of Land Management and the staff at Colorado Parks and Wildlife, who are responsible for permitting and overseeing recreation and conservation in the watershed. Although these stakeholders all hold different levels of interest and leverage in management decisions on the Dolores, they all rely on ecosystem services provided by the river. The emerging themes that we found through Phase 1 of stakeholder interviews reveal the power-laden nature of stakeholders in the watershed. The first theme was the identification of ecosystem services as an important component of recreational use and the ecological integrity of the river corridor. And the management of these ecosystem services and flow rate have ecological and social impacts. Second was the increased value that's ascribed to cultural services in low and high water years that was really evident. Stakeholders don't regularly consider the Dolores a recreational resource because of the unreliable, unsustainable flow rates as well as the uncertainty of release levels from the reservoir. And this unreliability leads recreators to a scarcity response, which means that recreators overwhelm and rush to the river when suitable flows are available. And the last emerging theme we found was the expression of fatigue and also notation of progress from the long contested battle over water allocation for recreation, anglers, and the integrity of the ecosystem. Because this is a recorded presentation, please feel free to pause the video to read through these quotes from stakeholders in their entirety. Under the theme of ecosystem services and management for recreation, recreators spoke of the dramatic changes to the riparian habitat that have occurred from a loss of ecosystem services. Rafters spoke of the need for long-term water release planning, and managers spoke of low water years becoming life support situations for native fish downstream, and some of the implications that come with that. Increased value of services due to scarcity was evident through both personal and professional experiences. Anglers spoke of moments of reckoning when the future of the Dolores became grim, and rafters spoke of the emotional experience of seeing the environment respond in ways that it shouldn't, with consistently low flow. And when managers were asked about scarcity responses, one admitted that the lower Dolores is undersupplied for the recreational demand it has in the area. Looking at the long history of water allocation fights, an angler spoke of the working relationships that have come from this collaborative movement in the watershed to provide the greatest good for the greatest number of people. While rafters remorsefully stated that the need for water storage will always win out. And managers spoke honestly about the uncertainty of climate change and warned that our current drought conditions should be looked at as the new normal. With all of this insight from stakeholders, we were able to start the process of modeling their perceptions on the future of the Dolores and the effect variable ecosystem services has on their experiences. The Dolores is representative of many sensitive southwestern watersheds in the face of climate change, and as populations shift towards the American West, it's important to understand the threats posed to ecosystem services that the communities rely upon. Stakeholders are forced to adapt to the variability of ecosystem services as well as variability in management. All stakeholders identified lost or threatened ecosystem services. Increasing trends and popularity in recreation, as well as a growing population, has increased pressure to the resources. But recreation has never been a higher priority in the Dolores than agriculture and irrigation, and this highlighted perception on the future of recreation is vital as more people fight for fewer resources to recreate in and with, while a majority of water is still being allocated for agriculture. Improving the allocation of supporting services such as water and habitat requires aligning ecosystem management with flow regimes through collaborative management on a multi-year scale. One example of what this could look like is aligning releases from McPhee Dam with spawning patterns for native fish that would match those natural ecological cues. Although our research is ongoing, we believe these initial themes and perceptions demonstrate the complex, dynamic, and politically contested nature of recreational engagement in the Dolores. Going forward, our research team intends to continue stakeholder interviews, diversifying our sampling. We'll then reanalyze themes and conclusions and pull together an ecosystem services inventory from stakeholder responses. In the end, we hope to forecast ecosystem services and provide a report that can help inform readers of the recreational management implications of the Dolores. I think this research is valued and important as stakeholders work to make sense of their connections and reliance to ecosystem services in a changing climate. This report can also provide managers and advocates with a framework for collaboration with stakeholders who hold the same goals and values. I'd like to thank you all for your time, as well as the staff at IASNR for putting this virtual symposium together. I look forward to returning with our next phase of results in the future. Additionally, thank you to the Bonderman Field Station at Rio Mesa for aiding us in our research efforts.